Today's segment is a news segment I've entitled A Day in the Marketplace, and today we're going to be going through today's Facebook Marketplace of electric guitars and talking about whether or not you should buy them or not, and I'll give you my hot takes on some of these listings and tell you whether or not it's a good listing or not, whether or not you should try to buy one of these guitars, or maybe, just maybe, you know, you're one of those guys with the listings and I'm giving you a warning, hey, change up your listing, it's kind of drab. So today, a day in the marketplace, the Nashville Facebook Marketplace. If you guys are in Nashville or you search Nashville, you will find these guitars as of August 2024. So these are going to be some of the same listings you'll see when you go to your own Facebook Marketplace listings, and hopefully that'll help you guys as you go about trading in Nashville and trading in the greater area. I've got my listings range set by price, so I've got $700 to $1,500. I kind of like that range. It's got a mix of like import to American, and we'll be going through each of these. I am going to, however, sort by the lowest price available. And as you can see, I've got electric guitar in the search bar. Now I'll go through, Gibson and Fender and all that, but specifically right now, we're going over electric guitar. So, just looking at thumbnails. So guys, thumbnails is the most important part of your listing, and if your thumbnail doesn't show the guitar, in general, it's not worth your time. So for example, like, what is this? Like, just the neck? Like, unless you love ESP, no. This one? No. Doesn't even tell you what model it is right off the bat, no. John 5, do you like John 5? Well, maybe you do. Let's click on it and see. Alright, so if you like John 5, maybe you'd like this guitar. It is a signature model, so more than likely someone's gonna want one, right? John 5's a pretty popular artist, and so, maybe you like this metallic with these somewhat interesting humbuckers. So, you can dig it if you want, but I wouldn't say it's my personal favorite guitar. I don't think John 5 has been relevant since like early 2000s, so we'll skip on that one. Alright, so, once again, these guitars aren't going to be things that I want. So a Sterling Jason Richardson, no. No one wants 7 strings. No one wants 7-string guitars. Epiphone Les Paul Prophecy, maybe somebody out in the middle of nowhere would want this one. I don't think anyone in town would like this guitar. Ibanez Acoustic, nope. Cordoba, nope. Jackson, nope. Alright, so the first interesting guitar I've got here is probably this Mint Epiphone 335 with the Lambert tones. So, I would argue that maybe I wouldn't go for this guitar, but it does include the hard shell case. He does say, like, no trades at all, right? So, in my mind, it's not worth the time. I can get a Gibson, he says, inspired by Gibson Epiphone 335. I can get one of those for like $300, $350, $400 without the Lambert tones. And honestly, unless they came with the original pickups, which it does, I wouldn't consider getting one of these, but I still think $700 is a bit too steep. I would recommend talking this guy down. I think talking this guy down would be the way to go if you wanted to go through some of these guitars. Alright, here's a good example of a guitar that's not in the big three, but maybe you would want to get and be tempted by. I wouldn't recommend it. Like, I like John Scofield, obviously great player. I just don't really feel like this guitar is a good representation of John Scofield, and it's an Ibanez. So you're risking going for a brand that's very niche, right? So Ibanez makes all kinds of guitars. They have for a long time. I don't think Ibanez does well in a market like Nashville, and that's my personal opinion. But also, John Scofield, jazz fusion, that kind of style of music, you're really only marketing to people who are in that world. So if you're looking for a cool guitar and you want to do the fusion thing, maybe the Ibanez John Scofield signature is for you. But for me, at $750, it just isn't worth it. Maybe if I could talk the guy down, if I thought I could flip the guitar, maybe. But unless I'm a John Scofield fan, I'm not going for that guitar. All right, let's try to find some American guitars now. These are all fun and games, but they're all just kind of meh. Like, listen, like a Furch, like a $900 Gibson, quote unquote, from Sparta, like, it's kind of a Gibson, it's a songwriter. Like, no, like, these are all kind of meh guitars, and that is like the weird messy middle of the guitar market. In this range of prices, you're gonna get a lot more junk than actual gems. It's important to just stick to your guns and really focus on guitars that you can really flip. Like, for example, here's a good guitar you can flip in this price range. 2012 Gibson Les Paul 60s. The Tributes, they're great guitars. They're wonderful. This one's a bit older than I would have liked, but it has the case. It looks really clean. It has got the P90s. You know, if you can get over the fact that it's not a true, like it's just kind of this natural wood grain finish, it could be a nice guitar. So think about these things. An easy way to get into American too. The tributes are American guitars, and so think about that when you go about it. But so not a lot of stuff here in what I would consider like the butter zone, this 1,000 to 1,400 zone. What that means is that my search is nearing in the end, and I don't really want Ovation or a Godin or a Schecter. So now I'm going to get real specific. I'm going to go Gibson, right? And then I'm going to include the same price range, and it'll make my search look just for Gibsons, which is really what I want. Sometimes if you search electric guitar, you get a couple of good guitars from like people who didn't label theirs correctly on Facebook Marketplace or whatever. It's good to look through all kinds of different search queues, but when it comes down to it, it just really needs to be specific keywords, and you're just hoping to get something nice in the basket. All right, so we got a couple guitars here. So interesting, I found one of my guitars. You'll see that when I search Gibson, it pulled up my Strat I had for sale. Why is that? SEO. SEO is so important when listing your own guitars. Search engine optimization. When you search a keyword in the search results bar here at Facebook, it searches your copy. And so if you're a Gibson player and you search for Gibson, you're going to get Gibson guitars, but not just Gibson guitars. You're going to get listings that have Gibson in the copy of the listing. So, for example, I've got Martin Gibson Fender here in my description, and so you're going to see that, hey, you know, I'm looking for those Gibsons, but it will show up. And getting your eyes on a guitar is half the fight. And then it's up to me and my thumbnail and my descriptions to lure people in. So think about that as you make listings. It's good to have some keywords that kind of pull from multiple searches. So anytime you search Martin Gibson, Fender, PRS, or Epiphone, my guitar will show up, which is kind of a cool thing, and it's good for getting eyes on your product. So inspired by Gibson 1959 Les Paul Reissue, great guitar. Would highly recommend. A little expensive. You could probably talk this guy down. Serious buyers only, so he's not interested in trades, but give it a little bit. He might come through. You know, you never know. Gibson SG61 Standard 23s, definitely worth getting. This is a great guitar. Also a great trade guitar. Now, this guy is not interested in trades. I try to honor that. There's something to say if the guitar's been up for a long time. You'd be like, hey, like respectfully, like I have a new guitar sell. Would you consider a trade or some kind of partial trade? Being respectful always helps. But generally, if they say you're not interested in trades, kind of leave them alone. But this is a great example of a guitar you could easily flip. These guitars are really, really new. There are a couple of things you need to be aware of when getting SGs, especially in a town that's saturated with SGs. One, you only really want the 61 standard. That's kind of the SG that everyone kind of wants. You can tell by the size of the pickguard, right? That's the biggest delineating factor, and they're always cherry. The other thing is that there are some SG standards that aren't 61 standards, but kind of look like this, right? Gibson has a number of SGs out in the ether. Like here's an example of an SG standard that's not a 61. Also new, but not going to have the same kind of value as a 61 standard. And there are also SG standards that came out, I bet I could probably find one, that are not really 61s, but kind of look like it. You can tell because there's a kind of a knurling on the back of the guitar. So here's a Gibson SG. This looks like so it's a made in USA, not the same. That's what I mean by that. And you can kind of tell by how this backplate is knurled. So this Gibson SG is not a 61 standard, which have like zero value. Like this guitar, if you look it up online, it's going to be in like the 800s or 1000s, which is why do not get tricked when buying an SG. Really important to not get tricked while buying an SG. You can definitely tell it's an SG by the made-in stamp also, as well as the knurled backplate. That's how you would know whether it was a 61 or not. So don't get tricked. And it's not, these people aren't tricking you, okay? These people are just listing their SGs. But if you want a 61 reissue, like this one, right? Just check the back of the guitar and make sure it's an actual 61. Now moving into some Les Paul Classics and some Les Pauls. We're in that price range now. Les Paul Classics, I'm not a big fan of. You can decide whether or not it's worth the time. I've never had luck selling or moving a Les Paul Classic. People who love Gibsons love classic Gibsons. Les Paul standards, 50s or 60s. SGs, 61 reissues. 335s, dots, right? People love dot 335s. I like blocks. But, you know, there's the idea there that you kind of want to get a standard Gibson if you're looking to trade for guitars, because Les Paul Classics, they're kind of like what you buy when you can't afford a Les Paul standard. No hate on the Les Paul Classic. It's a fine guitar, but with no gloss, the satin finishes are kind of gross, and people like humbucker covers more than they like the zebras. If they are looking for zebra buckers, they're looking for a signature guitar that they wouldn't be able to afford, or you for that matter. So be aware of that. All right, offsets. Gibson offsets, wouldn't go for those. Gibson Explorer, maybe, but it has to be very specific on the actual color. That is not a color I want, or I would think someone would want to buy. Ebony Explorers. People love Ebony Explorers in Nashville. It can be a little tougher to move an Explorer either way, but if you're going to get an Explorer, get an Ebony one. They're pretty great. Gibson Midtowns, you don't want. All right? Just take my word for it. Not a fan of the Gibson Midtown. Might as well just say for a 335. At $2,200, you can get an actual 335, and it will actually be more popular than what this guy is selling for here. All right? Now, this guy looks like he has a lot of gear, so, you know, he's probably a well-known player, whatever. But listen, Gibson Midtowns, no good. If you're going to get a Gibson Midtown, just know that you'll be stuck with it forever, and that you better learn to enjoy it, because it's not going anywhere. All right, now we're getting into Gibson Les Paul standard worlds, because now we're hitting the 2200, 2300 situation here. So, Gibson Les Paul standards, the price now on MSRP is $3,000. I think that's way too much for Gibson. I think they're even $3,300 now. Jeez Louise. But I will say that Gibson Les Paul standards retail in the used market for a lot less, like a ton less. It's like $2,000. I've seen them for $1,800. People who live their life hoping they're going to get their Les Paul sold for like $23, $22. I've not bought a Les Paul standard for anything more than $2,100. So, when you're buying Les Paul standards, really only aim for cherry burst or tobacco burst. Some people love the gold tops. Every gold top I've had, Les Paul standard-wise, I've had a hard time selling. So you take that for what it's worth. Cherry Burst is one of the best, better finishes. People like that finish. Once again, with Gibson, it's all about classic. You want the classic. Well, let's move into PRS land. We love PRS, don't we? PRS does not have a good turnover rate, right? People love PRS guitars. They get a modern PRS. They really enjoy it. I like PRS guitars, for the most part, right? So it's going to be tough for you to purely flip PRS guitars. Also, the PRS price ranges are so big. So things I've already seen, I'm not like a huge fan of. So PRS S2s, you're never going to sell them. This guitar has been on the marketplace for like years, it feels like. Definitely months. Not a big fan of the S2s. Modern S2s, you might find somebody, but make sure it's original. It has the original pickups. It has a decent finish, right? I like the white, but other S2s, I'm not a fan. Silver Skies. So I'm not a fan of Silver Sky as a model, but I am a fan of their ability to be moved, right? So Silver Skies get sold a lot in this town, right? Now I would say that $1,500, probably a little steep for a Silver Sky, right? There are a lot of Silver Skies out there. What you want to look for in Silver Sky land is the guy that'll sell you one for like $1,300, like $1,200. And if you can get into a Silver Sky, you've bypassed the vast majority of, you know, American Pro 2s, Pro 1s, junky Fenders. A lot of those early American Fenders you can bypass with a nice Silver Sky trade. So find a Silver Sky that has a reasonable price. $1,500 is okay, but I think I could talk this guy down, right? If you give him all cash, 13, maybe even 12. I've gotten really lucky. The lowest I've ever gotten a Silver Sky for was $1,200. So they're definitely out there, and if you don't have one immediately, you know, give it some time. You'll find someone who wants to off there something new, and you'll find something for cheap. PRS Starla Core. Some people love the Starla. I'm not a huge fan of the Starla, but I've got some diehard players. So the Starla has some interesting iterations. They have the Starla Core, and they remade the Starla line, but they're all imports now. So if you're going to get a Starla, get a Core. Some people love Starlas. but it's tough. It's tough to find someone who would want to trade you for a Starla. I think the best guitar in PRS's lineup, if you're looking at like mid-range pricing to get, it's probably the CE24. I think the CE24 offers you a lot of flexibility in the price ranges, and that's really based on finish. Some of these more like traditional finishes, like the smoke burst, or maybe it's a little, darker or redder, like those guitars are kind of meh. Like what you want are like bright. You want amber. Sometimes you can even find like a Verde CE24 that looks phenomenal. This one's a little beat up. He wants to trade, no trades for it. So I may not go for this one. PRS people are known for like being like clean. Like they want clean PRSs. Any guy that's wanting a CE24 from me maybe isn't a working guitar player, and so when he wants his guitar, he wants it like clean and spotless. So be aware of that when you're trading for guitars, but a CE24 is a great spot to be in if you can get there. I've bought CE24s for as little as 13. That's the lowest I've seen them go. You can definitely get in a good spot with yourself if you get a nice CE24 on the cheap. All right, so now we're getting into the more expensive guitars. Brent Mason signatures. Yeah, maybe. I think people would like that in this town. I wouldn't say that Brent Mason's signature is as popular as maybe the Fender version, right? People like the Fender Tele version a little bit more. But it's a great guitar. Like, if you've never played one, you should. They're killer players. I just wouldn't buy one necessarily unless I was sure I found someone who'd want the Brent Mason PRS. And then, talking about some of the custom 24s, we're getting a 10 top land. It's a bit too high in our price range. But some of these McCartys with generic tops, right? Or these, these years that are maybe a little bit lower, they're a tough sell. They're just really hard to move in this town. So when you're looking at a PRS McCarty, right? Or a McCarty 594, really the gaudier the better. You really want the most gaudy PRS you can find, because people, when they look at PRS McCartys, they want gaudy, okay? Whether or not you like that or not, I can't help it. These people don't like guitars that are kind of scuffed or maybe a little mellowed in the finish, right? Which early PRS finishes do kind of shadow as well too. They kind of get cloudy in the finishes. So you got to be really careful. And if you're going to go for, an early McCarty or an early PRS core, be aware that it might be hard to sell, because there's so many great PRSs out there that look just fantastic and they are modern, right? You can get them from 2016, 2018, and they look and feel and play amazing. And so people aren't buying guitars like this. This guitar is old, and you can tell it's old, right? Not that it's anything wrong with the guitar, but if it's a 2008, like, these are early PRS core models. I wouldn't say I would take the risk unless, I really thought I could move it with someone who loves vintage PRS. Guys, I hope you liked this video on trading in the marketplace. This is August of 2024, the Facebook Nashville marketplace. If you're mad that you saw someone's name and you're like, they didn't want their privacy done, wait, it's on Facebook, guys. It's public. Like, you can go look for yourself. I'm just using them as examples to help you guys decide on whether you want to buy a guitar or not. So be aware of that when looking at guitars on Facebook, right? There's a ton of stuff out there, but having the knowledge to sift through some of the garbage, some of the junk, is really important to getting a great deal on a guitar, and also knowing what guitars would be good or not, right? So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want more of this kind of video, like the state of the marketplace, the state of the market on guitars, let me know down below. I love to do more of these. It's fun just to talk about guitars on the marketplace, because I look at these guitars every day and I think, man, like, I wish someone else would know. Like, that's way too expensive. So let me know down below what you think, and we'll see you next time on IkeGuitar.